I founded the National Observer in April of 2015, and it's a national news organization, as most of you know, and we focus on energy and the environment and climate. And we spend a lot of our resources on investigative journalism. Just last week, we were honored by the Canadian Publishers Association as the best independent publisher in Canada. So there's been a lot of hard work and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that have led to that. And a lot of the tears have been mine, and the blood and the sweat has been done by our amazing reporters across Canada. You may know of Mike D'Souza, who is our managing editor now. Mike is based in Ottawa, and he's just, an incredible reporter who is really dedicated to exploring stories, often using freedom of information requests. And we've got Bruce Livesey in Toronto, who's another incredibly powerful investigative reporter, powerful in terms of the work that he does, and amazing freelancers that we work with everywhere. So it isn't always easy in this environment to be media, any kind of media, but it's particularly hard to do investigative reporting. I'll tell you a couple of stories that I think will illustrate why. Particularly for independent media, like a company like ours, we don't have a lot of infrastructure behind us. So we're fortunate to have an insurance policy that is there to protect us if we do get sued. And through that insurance policy, we have access to the wonderful David Sutherland, a lawyer in town who's defended lots and lots of media for many years. And kudos to David, because he makes me feel a lot safer. But sometimes David's like, no, you guys can't do this. And we go, well, no, we really have to do this. And so, even when you have a law, lawyers are there really to try to help you not get sued, but investigative reporters are there to get important information to the public. So there's a lot of tension at times between those two goals. So last spring, Bruce Livesey, our Toronto reporter, embarked on a series about the fourth wealthiest family in Canada, the Irvings of New Brunswick. And first he did a story in the Globe and Mail, and that was for their magazine, the business magazine, and that was great. And then he had 6 more stories that he was doing for us. And as soon as the Irvings saw that the first story come out, we began to get letters from a high-powered law firm, let's say, on Bay Street. And ironically, the letters came from a lawyer who was responsible for arguing the case in 2009 that that gave journalists more leeway, that allowed a defense, I think, of if you can prove that what you're doing is in the public interest, then you aren't going to be sued. You won't have to pay damages. So it gave us a little more leeway. So we were quite shocked to see this same lawyer was now working for the Irvings to threaten us as we sought to fact check the stories. So one of the stories, ironically, was called How the Irvings Intimidate Their Critics. And it was the 4th in the series, and it was the story of a guy named Rod Cumberland, who was working for New Brunswick's Department of Natural Resources when he published a paper linking glyphosates to a dropping deer population. So, as Bruce described it, he became the target of one of Canada's most powerful families and corporations, and in effect had a bullseye on his back. And so their concerted efforts to discredit him and his work were not unique. In fact, Bruce had a really hard time getting people in New Brunswick to go on the record. And one professor said, thanks for your interest, but I don't want to be interviewed, quoted, or referenced in regard to the Irvings. I would be too afraid. So all of that's going on before we even publish the story. And, you know, a lot of people believe that the history the Irvings have of going after critics, intimidating them, has created kind of a chill effect in New Brunswick. And it's a good example. I mean, I could go on, but I wanted to say that we spent tens of thousands of dollars, actually. Investigative reporting is very expensive because it takes a lot of time. So there's a lot of money that just goes into, like, you know, getting the story out. And then when this starts to happen and you're getting, you know, like regular communications from very powerful law firms, it's distracting, it's stressful, and at times it's scary. And what it does is, to just give you some insight, you know, so we're sitting in our little office in the Dominion building, the Save the World building, sometimes known as the Building of Lost Causes. And, you know, getting letters from the Irving's lawyers in Toronto. And, you know, so then there's a conversation between me as the CEO of the organization with the reporter, with Bruce. And I'm like, Bruce, you know, we've got to fact check, you know, we can't say that. Because, and he's like, why? That's the truth, a fact check. No, that's going too far. And so there's this and he goes, why? And I go, because we can't afford to be sued. And he's like, well, you know, it was different when I worked for CBC. And I'm like, I know. So that's, you know, and in the end, we come out with the stories, and they're powerful. And, you know, we got amazing mail from people in New Brunswick just saying, thank you, we don't hear this kind of thing. But it definitely puts a lot of chill on the story as you write it. And everyone experienced that whole period where we were doing that as extraordinarily stressful. Nobody went on medication that I know of, but maybe it would have been a good idea. So, you know, as Josh was saying, the thing about lawsuits is that I've been told over and over by my lawyer is that they don't have to have a good case. So, you know, I'm always mindful of that. It's really just a choice by that corporation or that individual to go after you. Now, one thing that we have going for us and why we actually have never been sued. We've gotten libel notices, we've gotten threatened, we've gotten, you better take that down, but we've never been sued. And I think why it is because a lot of the people that we're writing about, what they don't like already is that we're publishing information about them. And if they go to court, they're likely to be depositioned. So really, more information is going to come out. So it very well might end up embarrassing them even more, or then we'll really get to find out what went on. So the Irvings, you may not know this, but they run Irving Oil Refinery in New Brunswick. And they're also connected with the Energy East Pipeline. That's where the oil would be refined, a lot of it, not all of it. And that leads me to another story that Mike did, that Bob mentioned on Energy East. And he began publishing stories based on his investigation of the National Energy Board about Trans-Canada Pipeline and former Quebec Premier Jean Charest. And it became known as the Charest Affair. And it was picked up by lots of other publications. And ultimately, there was a huge public outcry in Quebec, and that public demanded that the panelists on the NEB panel basically, they said, this is conflict of interest. And the panelists were appointed by Harper before he left office. It was like a quick last-ditch thing Harper did to put these people in there. And, you know, I don't mean to speak of them disrespectfully, I'm sure they're fine people, but they they all ended up recusing themselves, stepping down from the panel as a result of Mike's reporting. I don't know, I don't have any proof of this, but something tells me TransCanada may not have liked all that. Don't think they were very happy about the hearings being shut down. I think they had thought it was going to be a pretty, they were going to get through that pretty well. And so, may not have been connected, but shortly afterwards we became the target of a searing editorial in the National Post, and we were portrayed as being funded by foreign foundations in an effort to discredit us. Our reporting was called advocacy reporting, a term that we hate because we don't see ourselves as activists or advocates. We see the role of journalists as people who report the facts, people who pursue stories because they need to be told, and we see ourselves as providing the public information. And if the public wants to take that and act on it, we hope that they will. That makes us really happy when we see that, but that's not what we're doing. We're not like hoping even, I'm sure we all have our own private beliefs, but as journalists, we're just telling the story. So that's their way of really undermining us. And Mike then registered a complaint with the Media Council of Canada. He wrote at the time, they couldn't attack the facts, so they attacked me. So, that's a pretty standard response sometimes. They have the right to do this. They can decide to go to court, they can figure out, their PR people can hire people to attack you and to undermine you, and that's all part of what you really have to be ready for when you take on big corporations. That's the razor's edge that we walk, and that's the razor's edge that we love, and I don't think any of us would want to be doing anything else. There's no reason to be in journalism today, except if you love taking on big challenges like this. And when you take on big challenges, you have to be ready to get big pushback. So I just wanted to say in closing, that one thing we know for sure, that in this post-Trumpocalypse world, we really need to strengthen everything that provides people with the capacity to think critically, to decipher on their own the difference between fact and fiction. And so in journalism, we need more people willing to take the risk of being bold and brave. Who are willing to say, yeah, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it anyway, because this is the right thing to do. I'm not going to let them intimidate me. All right, if we have to go to court, we're going to go to court. This is worth it. Yeah, so brave and bold reporters are needed more than ever. We work for the public, we work for you, and I feel like, together we can accomplish a lot. So please keep reading the National Observer and share it, and thank you so much.